Do you remember the first time you saw in the swimming pool the posters that went up with the rules of the pool on them? Little drawings. For instance, you weren't allowed to run, no diving, no food or drinks in. And of course, is the one that all of us as youngsters found funny, no kissing or cuddling. Well, what was the point of those? Well, certainly they were rules of safety. They were not a law as such, they were just good advice, um, carried out or formed by those who ran the swimming pools. But it's not as if you'd go to jail if you broke the rules, it was just how it was. Good advice. And rules very often are like that. It's not a matter of them being there to catch people out, but rules were there in the swimming pool just so that everybody can be kept safe. In terms of the Ten Commandments that we'll be looking at today, those commandments were there, just 10 of them, to try to be good advice. But the problem is that in our minds, we have made them out to be the source of judgment. We, as people, like the rules. We want to know what the rules are. Very often, not just so that we can live within them, but how can we circumnavigate them? How can we get around them? Even during this time of the pandemic, we wait on tender hooks to hear the announcements from those in charge. And then almost as soon as we hear them, there are commentators on talking about how you can get around the rules. And it certainly defeats the whole purpose. The reason for those rules during COVID-19 pandemic are to keep us safe, not just to catch people out. And I suppose it's good to have an attitude that no matter what the rules says we can do, we need to do what is right and what is helpful and healthy. But back to the Ten Commandments, because I think at times we have the same attitude toward those things that we just miss the point of them. Let me read some words from the Old Testament. We've reached Deuteronomy chapter 5. Moses convened all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and ordinances that I am addressing to you today. You shall learn them and observe them diligently. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. Not with our ancestors did the Lord make the covenant, but with us, who are all of us here alive today. The Lord spoke with you face to face at the mountain out of the fire." So Moses getting the people together was basically trying to say, you can't blame your ancestors. You can't say that God made these rules to people before me, therefore I just don't need to follow them. He was saying God actually made those promises with us, those of us who are living now and are alive now. And then he said something else. He went on to say that we need to learn them, to understand them, to be grafted almost within our thinking, so that we can be aware of them and obey them. But again, it just could not work out that way. Sure, it couldn't. People did not obey the rules. And when Jesus came, people thought, I'm sure, that the Messiah would come to say, it's okay, you don't need to worry about the rules. But he didn't. He said, I've come to fulfill the law. Now, what does that mean? I've always struggled with understanding that as a young Christian. But when Jesus came to earth, he said, and we read in the Gospels, that he did not come to get rid of the law, but to fulfill it. And he seemed to add to it and explain it more. So, for instance, he'd taken the commandment, thou shalt not murder. Jesus said, that's what you believed your ancestors have said, but listen, let me explain it to you. Even if you have an angry thought, even if you think that you want to kill him, that is just the same as actually doing it. And then he said that phrase, I've come not to abandon or abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And this is how he fulfilled it. You see, the thing with law is that law demands a response. And the response is that it demands obedience and following the law. And the consequence of breaking that or not following it is that you're found guilty. And that law demands some kind of recompense. So here was God. He had set the covenant, set the commandments, and it didn't work out. The people just found it impossible to keep the law. But the law still demanded some kind of punishment for failure. And so when Jesus comes, when he takes on the mantle of humankind, and as he is found guilty and dies and goes to hell for 3 days before resurrection, that is Jesus fulfilling the law, fulfilling the consequences of there being law. And then the whole thing has changed in that we no longer follow the commandments because out of a fear of failure. No longer does it judge us because Jesus has fulfilled the demands of the law and breaking the law. Therefore, we don't need to follow the law scared of making a mistake, but rather we follow the law because it was out of love that God gave the commands. It's out of love that God gives advice as how to live. It's out of love and commitment to us and that desire for each one of us to live the best life possible that he says, okay, if you want to know my blessing and you want to enjoy life, well, then it's best if you stay away from these things. It's best if you don't think like this. It's best if you can treat other people this kind of way. Those are my rules. Not so that I can catch you out, but because I love you, I want to teach you. And don't worry about the guilty thing because Jesus has already fulfilled that demand that law brings. Father, I want to thank you so much for what Jesus has achieved while on earth. And forgive us when we haven't fully understood the freedom that is ours because of Christ. No longer do we fear you. Because if we have received the generosity of what Jesus achieved in fulfilling the law, then we are free. And we no longer have to obey law just because we want to escape, but we want to obey your advice, your rules, your law, because it's the best way that we can live. Thank you. Thank you for your advice and teaching and rule. And may we follow you more closely every day of our lives for your glory and for our enjoyment of life. Amen. And so, the 2 tablets of stone representing the law as Moses received it goes on our Jesse tree. And I'll see you again tomorrow.